So, good morning, good evening, and good night, literally.
Right. Yeah.
Back to another session of Metropolis at Home. This is our seventh session. And with us, we have Professor Rejina Maskey Byanju, professor at Tribhuvan University in Kathmandu, Nepal. And we have engineer Suzanne Wheeler from the Water New South Wales State Agency, and she's regulatory strategy advisor in drought resilience. First off, Metropolis at Home is a part of the MetroGov 3C project, which is a research project at Instituto Superior Técnico in Lisbon, University of Lisbon, funded by the Portuguese Foundation for Science and Technology. So we're obviously thankful for that support. I would start with asking you to introduce yourselves. So maybe starting with Rejina, could you briefly just say, who are you, what do you do now, and what's your relationship with the city you live in?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Pedro. Thanks for inviting. I'm as you know, the Rejina Maskey Byanju, and I'm a professor at the Central Department of Environmental Science, Tribhuvan University, and currently holding a head of the department as well. And for the last 30 years, I've been working here in Tribhuvan University, and as this university also in the Kathmandu Valley. That is how, and I live in the Kathmandu Metropolitan city, and this is kind of capital city of the Nepal. Yeah, all of know, and that is how I am really linked with it from the very beginning, and everything goes here is surrounding me, also not only me, also with other my activities as well. That is how the this metropolis, all the problems is related with me, I would say, both in work and also in personally and also in the others. I just would say that. Thank you.
And Suzanne?
Hi everyone, I'm Suzanne Wheeler. I lived in Sydney for, good question, I would say more than 20 years. I started, I was born in Hong Kong and I moved to Australia to do my university. And I've been working in water industry for over 20 years, and I'm passionate about water. My current role is responsible for managing regional drought, and let's hope that I have all the solutions to fix the drought in the future. I know Sydney very well because not only I live here, but also my parents, they were educated here as well before they moved back to Hong Kong. And my husband's born here as well, and so is my daughter. So we know Sydney back to front, and we like to drive around and travel a lot, so we know all the townships, and yeah, it's a lovely city to live in, for sure.
Okay, so that sets up my next question, and maybe we could start with you, Suzanne. If you had to describe your metropolitan area to a friend who had never visited, what's really unique and special about Sydney?
I would say, looking from the backdrop, it's definitely there's a lot of beaches, and it's lovely. It's most of everyone would like to enjoy the outdoor living rather than stay indoor, and the climate certainly allow us to do a lot of outdoors activities as well. But the problem is not only just me, everyone else loves Sydney too. So Sydney is getting quite packed. As a result of it, there's a lot of apartments come up, and the city getting more crowded together with traffic as well. So COVID certainly make us rethink of how we want to live, whether it's in an apartment, open space, or live in a house. what are the choices and what's best to suit the family. That's changing a lot of people's view from then on.
I'm certain you already have all the answers, right? Okay. This
I hope
is
so.
a really challenging time. So Regina, how would you describe Kathmandu and the region to a friend who had never visited?
I would say that Kathmandu is, as I tell you, is not only the capital of the Nepal, but it has a historic value, and it is all famous for the archaeological development as well. And it hosts almost 7 old heritage sites, cultural heritage sites in the Kathmandu. And beside that, it is surrounded by big mountains and the Himalayas. It is kind of a valley, and that is how the peoples are attracted in this city. And within the past years, but however, it is it has been, as the Suzanne said, in Sydney, the Kathmandu also in the past, it is the one of the still a metropolitan city and one of the biggest urbanized place, and almost 2.4 million people live here, with a population density about nearly 15,000 per square kilometer. So it is now became the crowded the most, and beginning with that, and you know that Nepal is still a least developed country. And having said this, there are lots of problems bringing over this urbanization. We have the water problem. We have in some places plenty of water, some places drought. Suzanne will be helpful in Nepal also. And we have the all kind of other, beside that, the city is vulnerable with the natural disaster, including the earthquake and the other urban floods. And that is how I will explain to the person who will first.
Yes,
But
we'll get into the sectoral issues later, and those will be very interesting to hear about. But before that, do you feel like there's a metropolitan identity? So people that live in smaller municipalities, do they feel like they belong to this Kathmandu thing, metropolitan area, or is it a city thing where people from Kathmandu are from Kathmandu, but people from smaller villages or suburban neighborhoods, they have their own identity?
Yes, and they have their own, actually, the different identities, you will see, because in the Kathmandu in the past year, due to the in-migration of this urbanization, I will say, haphazard, you can see now in the whole Nepal, there are 101 ethnic people, but you can find all of them in Kathmandu municipality. You see, that is how it is. But for them, those ethnic people who live in villages, that is quite different. No, they are in their own identity like that. But if you come to the Kathmandu, you can see all of them together here, and some of them changed also, and some of them still keeping. That is why there is a kind of a cultural differences, and but the celebration are in together and different. That is, you can see the lots of different cultural practices in the small Kathmandu valley itself.
Interesting. And Suzanne, do you feel people identify with Sydney as the central business district and cultural activities in the center of the metropolitan area, or is Sydney a metropolitan construction?
Good question. Because Sydney itself, people do identify themselves as from Sydney. However, different suburbs, there are one closer to the beach and further away from the beach. They do sort of have different identity that way. And in terms of Sydney itself, Sydney is the major coastal township within the state. And there are a few other major coastal cities, but smaller cities. And then there's a mountain range, and over the mountain range go towards the west. there are the regional townships. So they are individual townships, smaller, and they have their own identity as well as culture, and they're all proud of their own townships, and we do have this special big things in individual towns like big pineapple, big bananas, and things like that, statue or big guitars and things like that to make those townships stands out. Now, because with COVID, the rules seem to apply on a statewide basis. So yes, whatever happened to Sydney, that's also applied towards the regional townships as well, somewhat slightly different, but nonetheless is all across the whole state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That brings us to the next question, which is what levels of government actually have a say at the metropolitan level in Sydney Metro. So you have the state level, which is very strong in Australia, but what are levels of government and whether or not those are elected? Could you expand a bit on that?
Okay, so for COVID restrictions, that mostly apply to Sydney area because I think the population density as well, and also transport from overseas international traveling and all. And so I believe the state government was aware of that. So the rules set up for COVID especially apply to Sydney metropolitan area one set, and also slightly different for the regional townships. And traveling from Sydney to the regional townships, they just state government just advise us to be mindful to not travel to the regional community when the COVID at this peak. The reason is there's also Indigenous communities and in the area as well, and also there's hospital facilities and things like that is not as some of the regional areas is not well equipped compared to big major towns for that reason. So regional travel is restricted a bit, but within Sydney area is quite flexible. I think we are in the bubble of restricted overseas travel and also interstate travel. As a result, the rules are not driven by local councils for Sydney, but more for the state rules itself.
Is that the norm for everyday life without COVID? Does the state level government really supersedes most other power levels, or is it shared with municipalities, townships, and eventually even the federal government?
So international travel, I would say that's probably banned by mainly on a federal level.
Like the day-to-day management of the metropolitan area, like transport systems and park systems and so on. Is that something that is shared among different power levels, or is that concentrated in a single level?
I would say on the policy level is mainly from the state government, but on services, let's say councils for land development, for let me think, it's not so much for water services. Water services are on a statewide, or there's Sydney Water as well, so they do manage the metropolitan area. But some of the minor services is actually covered by council, so that they have dedicated service and fit the local area as well, rather than a big city. One size of the rules is hard to fit everyone.
What levels of government are elected? All of them? Directly elected?
Both councils. Councils is a small suburb basis kind of municipal level, and then the state level and the federal level, they're all elected ones.
All directly elected. Is there a lot of overlap between, you mentioned like the state water agency and the Sydney water agency. Is there a lot of overlap of the scope of activity between these local metropolitan entities and the state entities?
Not so much, actually. I would say instead of overlap, it's collaborative.
Okay.
But
So
the
it tends to be
jurisdiction is quite
friendly.
clear. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Now let's hear about the other side. Regina, how many government levels and whether they're elected or not
Yeah,
operate in
yeah,
in Kathmandu?
yeah. As to mention that we have a new constitutions on 2015, and under this constitution, then we have a three government level, one state level, then the provincial, one federal level, and the seven provincial level, and then below that, then we have a local level. And all of these, like one federal, seven provincial, these all have a electoral sites according to the urbanization and area. It has been the different seats with this, and also in the municipal local levels also there is a by the election elective. And then this is under this constitution, these three layers we have only comes from the 2017. And during this administrative boundaries and also the layering, what's happened, the most of the rural communities previously in the rulers have been collectively formed into municipalities. Uh, that is why now there are in whole Nepal there are 293 municipalities total, of which the 6 are the metropolitan, including Kathmandu municipality. And next to the Kathmandu is the you must most of the tourists heard about is Lalitpur and Bhaktapur. The Lalitpur is the sub metropolitan, and wherever Bhaktapur is state municipalities. But when we talk about the Kathmandu, these two sister cities are always combined together. And they, as Suzanne says, there is a collaboration always needed, even though now that the laws has made that these are the things local government can manage. They're like daily water uses, water planning. The federal government is to make the different acts and the rules and also the international collaborations that is to the federal government, and the provincial that comes with the provincial, and the provincial has their own rights and laws, and uh, inside the provincials comes to local. And uh, there are some of them are like still need to be because they are not like in the Australia, it is practiced from the very beginning. So there are still the local and also the provincial governments are still finding out what are their rights in all the areas, because some of them are overlapping also. They find it like that, and still in a progress. But however, the law has already made clearly these are the things the local government should do, and those are the things come up with the provincial, and this comes with the federal. It's like that, and that is how the in this recent it's worked. And local there are many things the local government can do by themselves.
Yeah,
That is
this is the construction of new power
yeah,
structures is always a
yeah,
very interesting aspect. In Portugal, we had
yeah,
a dictatorship through well, a lot of
yeah,
decades, and
previously, yeah, that is
nominally
how.
the municipal governments were kept in place during the dictatorship, but they were not democratically elected, and they had very limited power beyond the national government. But once we had the democratic transition in 1974, we had to rebuild the municipal level almost from scratch. And it's very interesting because I was born after the revolution, so I kind of assumed the municipal level was always kind of powerful in Portugal, but they had to learn how to
Yeah,
manage their own territory
yeah,
almost from scratch through
yeah,
democratically elected politicians, through the reconstruction of the managing structure and the
Yeah.
hiring of experts and so on. It's a very interesting and challenging period, I
Yeah,
would say.
and this is a period we are still in transition, I would say, because it
Yeah.
is just a 2 years, 2 3 years, and the 1 years we have the COVID whole
Yes.
year, whole world, and that makes only 2 years, and it's really finding difficult for this local councils, and but it's still working, as the Pedro said. Yeah, we're
Do you feel
struggling the challenges, and yeah.
Do you feel current interlocal, intermunicipal boundaries are an issue? So is the metropolitan area sliced by local boundaries that make the articulation of services across the boundaries, say road networks or park
Yeah.
provision, that are affected by these boundaries and subdivisions, or is it very seamless?
Uh, they are yeah, these boundaries are effective because since some of the boundaries are by the river, no, some are by the main roads and that connected with each other. So and also some mostly the roads and the rivers, in our case the boundaries are made like that. And uh, and by that, what's happened, previously there are the 75 districts, and the peoples are easy doing those kind of things. Now what's happened, once it new system comes, the province, some of them, the districts now became in the two parts, you see. And so they're still struggling further, but not for the Kathmandu. I'm saying to the other parts. So that these local bodies are now still because half comes to the one province and the half goes to the another province, and the for the industries also. No, previously it was in the another province and now goes to the another parts, and they are still making the I think we need to learn from the Suzanne mostly. The collaborative way is required actually for the good management.
Is Kathmandu metropolitan area an entity? Is there an association of local agencies, or does it correspond to the province of Kathmandu, the metropolitan level?
Kathmandu Metropolitan City comes with the province number 3, what we called as the Bagmati Pradesh now, because it's previously the Bagmati. And for here is not much a problem, because it is it is there from the very ancient time. This is a capital city, and all the infrastructure or the developments, everything's the centers are here. So so it is kind of
Strong entity.
and yeah, it's and the other villages which is now in the quite side of the Kathmandu metropolitan city, they want to be with the Kathmandu metropolitan city as well, because they can develop with this also. So
we'll get into that later. That's a
yeah.
very good point you're making. Suzanne, how does the articulation across boundaries work within the metropolitan area? Do you feel like the subdivisions between townships and even within the most dense areas of the metropolitan area pose a problem for continuity and provision of services?
Okay, I'm gonna start with a funny background information. So in terms of suburbs in Sydney, as that's municipal within Sydney, as well as between Sydney and different states, let's say New South Wales state towards another state, the boundary has never been clear. So when we drive between townships, we go, oh, we're here already. It's never obvious to us. And same with suburbs, from one to another, it's never clear. We just drive through the suburbs from one to another, and that was it. However, during Christmas time, that was a past Christmas, there was an active COVID case in some of the coastal northern beaches suburbs. As a result of it, the state government set up boundaries to isolate than residents within roughly about 4 suburbs. So the boundaries become an obvious thing to us. And same thing when there's lockdown between states, we have roadblocks set up between state boundaries. Those boundaries become obvious, but before then it wasn't obvious at all. So Pedro, would you please ask the question again about the population density?
Yeah, so that's extremely interesting because we kind of felt the same, probably not as intensely here in Portugal when municipal boundaries were put into effect. There were never actual boundaries on the floor, but now you have roadblocks surrounding the municipalities, and suddenly you figured out, oh, the supermarket is on the other municipality. I wasn't aware of that. But I mean, in everyday life, for instance, continuity of road systems, I feel you've already answered. That's not really an issue. But do you feel
I was actually saying that's an issue altogether for people living close to the border, because that boundary was literally invisible to the people living there. They got used to it, cross the border back and forth. However, because of the border enforcement on lockdown for some states, different rules applies. So people go to school across the border, and people go to hospital appointments across the border. That will be probably 14 days quarantine period just between school and coming back. So that's actually become an issue for a lot of the workers or the residents living close to a boundary between states. And that's also an issue for infrastructure project as well, where you have contractors usually just come across the border. Instead is certain restrictions and certain impact, and that we have to apply for special rules to cover that as well. And so until the boundary is visible, we didn't even know we had a problem.
I think that's what's really useful here is it highlights how good you had it before COVID, because you've just mentioned two things that are not clear in many metropolitan areas, which is that people they have service provision across the border in other municipalities, like school systems and so on. And in many countries, the districting in the school systems and so on is a very strong invisible barrier between different communities.
Yes.
So Sydney is a quite integrated region, you would say. The townships were together and...
Well, Sydney is quite kind of at the middle of the state, so we have less of that issue. But however, we do talk to friends and family live in country towns and all. And also Queensland is the next state from New South Wales and closer to the tropics. So it's certainly a favorite, one of the favorite holiday destinations. So any holiday time, people will travel across the border. But because of COVID, we realized that that's no such an option. We get stuck within the state. And that's also have impact to other states' tourism as well. And certainly booking as well. People book, I would say 6 months ahead, and they just never predicted this would happen to them. And the plan is you have to have a change of plan for sure.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's a lot of now let's talk outside the COVID situation? So in hopefully what will be our life once again in a few months. Is there a strong civil society movement for striving to get better service provision or for solving problems that occur at the local scale within Sydney Metro? Is this a big political platform? The citizen groups, the social networks, the local associations, are they strong?
I believe they're very strong. The social network keep everyone informed. And I think the reason that during COVID, the majority of time for Sydney is in summer compared to Europe countries. So we tend to want to go outdoors, and we want to keep people informed on what the facilities allowed us to venture outside and do our shoppings, just exercise and all. And so this, in terms of social groups and all, keep everyone informed of what's available, what's possible, and where the crowd is as well. And information about public transport. State government also done a really great job to put in social media announcements and also keep not just everyone, but particularly young people, because young people tend to be one to not want to stay indoor. So that gives them options to maybe keep themselves busy that way. And in terms of school and all, there's a bit of a COVID lockdown. Obviously, children have to learn from social media and all about some of the information, what they do, and find research and all. And yeah, it's a very different world, but it's certainly improving now. And about transport that you mentioned, transport facility has been well set up. There's blocking seats and stickers and all on seats to make sure people keep the distance apart, and the staff been wearing face masks and all. I don't believe Sydney has gone back to normal operation yet. So the public transport is still not fully packed, and people are still working from home at this stage. So I can't tell you what the future would be. You have to wait and see.
Before COVID, did you have like big traffic issues or transportation network system issues? And was there a public outcry for improvement of service or not?
Absolutely. So Sydney traffic is very packed, and many people stuck in traffic. And for me, I take an hour and a half to get to work, and an hour and a half to get back home every day. That's public transport. Public transport is quite well organized, but it just the distance, as well as every time everyone want to travel around peak hours. So because of that complaint, and people will sort of feel the stress of it, the state government actually put in this called light rail. So it's not quite train. It's a smaller capacity than standard train, but it's certainly electric railroad along parallel to the buses on the main roads. So that actually came on at the peak of COVID. So
it never really
we
worked,
really
right?
see the full effect of it, or the full benefit of that light rail system just yet. And now that COVID have somehow calmed down a lot compared to the peak of COVID, I made an attempt to drive to work in the past week. The traffic was far worse than before COVID. The reason is people actually try to drive, and everyone tried to drive. So most of the car only have one passenger to get to work. As a result of it, the road is fully packed. And I would say the traffic over weekend is even worse than weekdays.
Oh, wow.
Because
too bad.
everyone tried to leave home as well and just have a break. So there you go. I'm not sure it's actually reflect on what we expected of the traffic congestion would be somewhat different, because people working from home. In fact, it's probably opposite.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rejina, is the civil society strong in Kathmandu? Do they have a platform? Is public involvement typical in major projects or in decision making in the metropolitan region?
There are the civil societies, but I would say not strong enough. uh, in the process of, as you said, different projects and order carried out by the metro cities, they always involve the citizens groups. But however, I can see that uh, not so strong. But in some of the cases, the people come up strongly, especially in protesting. Like, I just want to give some example. As I told you, this came Kathmandu Metropolitan City because of the transition periods of both political and the other development. I would say that there is a massive change in urbanization. It is almost 4% urbanization per year in Kathmandu Metropolitan City. That's making lots of congestions, and our local government come up with the different projects for the urban planning, like the smart cities project and other link roads and other kind of projects. But what's happened in some of the areas, because as I told you, this is the historical place as well. We have and the historical towns, small towns also there, and those roads which now the urban plannings come up with those cities, no, and they don't want to lose their entity, their cultural heritage. They are afraid that if the roads, even though the roads brings about the access and other development, they don't want to change with that cultural things, cultural entity, and they are not allowing government to make these roads through passing through those areas. And that is how I think, Pedro, this is the one you want to see about, no? The
And
peoples
are
are not
they successful
allowing,
in preventing
yeah,
it?
yeah, implementing those roads over those. But now it is still in the process of convincing them, and it's going on. But I the one thing is they don't want to lose their cultural entity. The another thing is they are afraid that because the most of these small towns, they have agricultural and cultivation lands, and that will be changed, and they lose their own property. That is what also. And so the most of the parts, these development projects are now in kind of not moving at all. And some of the outside the Kathmandu metropolitan city is working, this smart city, and is undergoing. Lots of new cities have been developing, but in the metro cities, because the lots of urban management plans been formulated, but cannot move further still.
You
That is the
mentioned that
situation. Yeah,
Kathmandu Metro is now nearing 4 million people. You
yeah,
probably, being a narrow valley, you probably have huge
yeah. It's,
transportation issues.
yeah,
Do you feel
lots.
like they're being
Lots.
addressed, especially through a public transport perspective?
Yeah, we have a quite a lot traffic congestions, and we in the valley we already open everything now. Unlike the Sydney and the Europe, uh, we all open already. All the schools opens already. All the working, everybody is opening, and also that. Uh, Lots of people are not taking care of, I would say, the marks and the other things as well. And that's in the before this COVID also, the traffic is a problem. The total vehicles in the Kathmandu valley is exceeding 1 million already. And if you see the total number of vehicles throughout the Nepal, of the total vehicle, the 40% ply only in the Kathmandu Valley. You see,
Wow.
40% of that. And so it is really a congestion. And there are, as I told you, several urban plannings have been put forward by the government for these access roads and feeder roads and outside ring roads, those things. But now it is still some of the places it is undergoing construction, but some been protested by the local peoples. it cannot move. The situation is like that.
How does the public transport system work? Is it based on small buses, or is there an intention
Yeah,
to build a subway system, something
no,
like
we
that?
don't have the subways in Kathmandu metropolitan city. Uh, uh, and actually, and we have a buses, public buses, and most of those buses have been given by the private uh, transport agencies, given by the license by the government, you see. And there is also the one the government system also, government control one also, but most of the other buses are the from the private entities. And as Pedro says, because the roads are in the town centers, the roads are the very narrow from the beginning, and it's already congested, and there is no places to you can widen the road, you see. And therefore, yeah, certainly, unlike the Sydney or the in Portugal, we don't have a big buses plying, public buses. It is kind of buses, but not so big one. And also we have the mini buses, and there are also the other publics like tempos, but now is all by the battery one, electrical, and that connects with the feeder roads inside the small roads, those kind of public transport. We don't have subways and these things.
And is there a community movement trying to request better public transit, or is it's really not a political issue at the moment?
Uh, and, yeah, people are always concerned about these transportation systems, and actually, like uh, uh, especially because I am from the environmental background, we all always want to promote for the public transport systems, good public transport system. But the thing is that everybody wants their own car, and the if you have something, then they want to have their own vehicle. That is easy. And actually, the lots of motorbikes you will see here,
Yeah, yeah.
unlike in Sydney and there, because that is easy one in the narrow, and in the congested one, you can with the fast, the motorbikes are the maximum number here, and
Mhm.
that makes difficulty in going around the or for the other cars also. That places difficulties for the other kind of vehicles as well. That is the situation. Yeah.
They do take less space though.
They do take leg space, but there are about 90,000 motorbikes already flying in the small area. So you can imagine.
Yeah. Um, you mentioned environmental issues, which are obviously something
Yeah,
that personally concerns you. So I've heard that Kathmandu is at times one of the worst polluted cities in the world because of the configuration
yeah,
of the narrow valley surrounded by
yeah,
mountains and so on.
yeah.
What are the most significant environmental issues in the metropolitan area?
Yeah, yeah, you are quite correct, because if you see last in the, I would say in February, 2 days is the topmost city. It rank the in polluting in air pollution. um, that is, yeah, well, air pollution is a problem right now, is come up as a main and attracting to the everybody, because as Pedro quickly said, it is a valley, and also the valley, and you know that the pollution cannot be spreading, so it's trapped. It depends upon the meteorological parameter as well. But having said this, I would say that I can see the one of the main sources of this air pollution is the vehicles itself. Mm. And another is the construction. As I told you, because of these systems going on and local entity is stronger, and especially after the 2015 earthquake, you might have heard about this big earthquake, which
Yes.
almost demolished more than 8,000 people died. at the time. You see in the Kathmandu, and this all cities have been crashes, and that makes the lots of construction going on. See, not only the local people's planning for this urban development, also because of this disaster, there lots of construction going on. That makes the construction with the fine particulates matters and others, and that makes even pollution. And that is the one region for the pollution in Kathmandu. The another is the valley itself is the one of the valley by not dispersion is the case. The another is in the surrounding, in the peripheral region, there are the brick kilns, and which are still polluting, brick kilns. Yeah, you see, and they are also polluting, especially in the dry seasons, especially in this season, February, March, and they are bright, and the till April, that is serious problems. And another water pollution we have, Suzanne, quite a lot, you'll see. And also, the water pollution is also massive because we have a problem of the sewage systems still. It is the difficulty in the planning and joining all these urbanize, because it is so urbanizing quickly that within, and no plant sewage system, and they directly go to the rivers, and that makes the pollution. And most of our drinking water comes from the underground, okay? And our water systems come from the underground. Even the government water supply systems all are from the underground. And what's happening now, the lots of extraction from the underground, and that is then the land submergence in some of the areas.
Yes,
Due
yes.
to the extraction of the, that is also the another problems coming up here.
Who is responsible to put the sewage system in place or to improve it? Is it the local governments, the provincial level?
Actually, it is the local government now. It is local government, but as I told you, it is, we are still in just the 2 years. No, this treaty has been formed, and there, and the laws and those activities are formed by the federal government and then the provincial government, and the local government need to implement those. And so they are still in the was that, and for the Kathmandu metropolitan city is kind of that it still need a cooperation from the central governments quite a lot. And also the other cities also, as Suzanne said, they are all intact. No, actually these all cities are in Delhi. You go with the other cities for the work, the people go, children go to school to the other cities. And actually that is also the thing, like sewages and the solid waste problems. That is the another main problem here. What's happened, where the Kathmandu metropolitan city have a landfill site, but from the very beginning, all the municipalities of not only Kathmandu metropolitan cities, whole of the valley, the west is going through that landfill. That is how, because it is supposed to for the 15 years, but within the 3 years, it's been full.
3 years.
Yeah,
Wow.
you see, that's the thing. And now it is that the new landfill site, the people are more sensitive here in the Kathmandu metro cities, because the literacy is almost 98%, and they don't, the peripheral people doesn't allow them to make the new landfill site. The problem is like this now. They don't
Nothing
allow
in
them.
my backyard.
Yeah, nothing in my backyard. You don't come here. Yeah, this lots of problem. Even the solid waste problems, they're quite, and the it's too serious actually, I would say. And because of this urbanization also in the haphazard way now, because it's come up with the haphazard, and there are slums are increasing. That makes in within the rainy seasons there will be always urban flooding now. That's the another problem coming up. Wait, and by this urban planning, what's happened? The dengue and those in the summer, you will find with the serious health impact of dengues, those kind of things like diarrhea, dysentery, all
Mhm.
those things. Yeah, not only the air pollution. Even though the air pollution is now that we said about 100 people die by due to air pollution. Indirectly, we calculated as like that per month. You see, that is too much. More than COVID, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now let's move to what I feel would be very different problems. But
Yeah,
Suzanne, you work in the
water.
water sector, and
Yeah.
especially the drought management, which is a serious issue in Australia, but one that I didn't quite associate with New South Wales. Is it a local issue in Sydney Metro, or is it a water provision issue for
Mm.
such a large city? What are your main concerns at the metropolitan scale?
At the metropolitan scale,
Yes,
that's
in
is
terms of
just
water
we didn't have,
provision and drought.
is I guess we just didn't have enough rain during the past year and a half. So doesn't matter how well we prepared for drought conditions, when there's continuous no rain, not enough rain, and that certainly have major impact. And on top of that, when you asked about pollution, I thought, no, we didn't have very bad pollution until the bushfire hit. And that
Yeah.
was yeah. However, we have
Yes.
the face mask prepared for a different reason, but it certainly helped us with pollution from the bushfire of the soot as well, the charcoal in the air. And so that was quite severe air pollution. And in terms of air sound pollution, we don't hear as many planes going over.
Yeah, that's
um,
right.
so that's certainly a bit of change as well. Now, for water supply itself on a drought perspective is basically, I think, is a long-term planning to prepare for not just drought itself, but also the added element of climate change as well.
Mhm.
So I think that's a lot of work that we need to follow up. Yes, drought is almost over for most of the country towns as well as for Sydney, because we have a fair bit of rain in the past, roughly about 2 months.
Mhm.
Really heavy rain in fact. So sometimes flood quite often follow through from drought, which is
Yes.
pretty dramatic. And as a result of it, because the soil was so dry, when the heavy rain downpour and all, it's actually bring a fair bit of water quality pollution to the drinking water system. So those are the after effects, but mainly towards the regional township, because for Greater Sydney is a very sophisticated water supply system. So they treat all sort of conditions of the water quality. And also we have a desalination plant as a backup as well.
Mhm.
So that's an alternative supply, and that's have almost have less of a climate change impact would affect the desalination for that. So it's a bit of an insurance policy in some ways.
The major drought management strategies, they're articulated at the state level, right?
Actually, both regional in terms of municipal areas. In Greater Sydney, it just on Sydney itself is managed by major utilities for Greater Sydney and for some of the coastal towns, coastal cities.
Mhm.
In terms of regional townships, they have their own water supply and sewage system, and they are user pay systems. So they kind of need to set up the system for the longevity as well. They have long-term planning for the infrastructure and make sure it lasts as well. So for drought and for security, they need to look into the township, the urban area connected, the reticulated system of the connection and the sustainability of the supply. However, there's also irrigations as well, and that's not connected to the urban system in little townships. And that's where a broader thinking of a catchment thinking. So from a dam all the way to different townships to different municipals would be a broader planning for a state government to develop. Yeah, and the national level, of course, there's a broader policy setting, but they still need to have the statewide policy to fit in what the state required, something like that.
Is there a metropolitan-wide land use plan, like a master plan for the urban region, or is it up to each of the municipalities to come up with their own planning strategies?
It's up to the little urban councils.
Okay, so
the regional
there
councils
might be
as well.
some conflict in land use strategies across boundaries, possibly, no?
Absolutely, especially development of a broader strategy like a new airport in the works, and that will be cross boundaries between multiple councils and all. So there's always I would say not just conflict but also civil movement, as well as heavy media influence as well.
Oh yeah. And who is the problem solver in that situation? Does the state government kind of step in to put the municipalities to work together, or is it just an inner level within one level of government conflict, or does it escalate to be mediated by the upper level of government? How does that work?
Most of the time will be state government step in, but also sometimes depending on funding. Let's say if the funding process is both state and federal level, then of course federal level would have this input as well. Yeah, so I think it's case by case, but I think depending on the user pay system or the community where they sort of felt that this is taxpayer money to support the infrastructure, the project going forward, and they want to have their say too.
Interesting. I feel like Australia is somewhat in between what we experience here in Europe and what I experience in the United States. So it's not a fully bottom-up organization in terms of the levels of government, but a lot of strength for the local and state levels, but with some little hints of what happens in Europe in terms of coordination. It's not the winner takes all situation that we experience in some of the regions of the United States. So it's a very interesting case to be studied. Now, as for Kathmandu, I would like to ask what happens when you have this conflict across the border. For instance, a sewage system needs to be connected across the border between two local governments. Do they come to an agreement, or does the provincial government step in to try to make it work?
Generally, they do come to the conclusion most of the time. Until and unless they do come to, it is always difficult once the higher authority comes, no? That will be difficult. But in some of the cases, they do come, the state government, as Suzanne said. But now that the others, as you said, the one of the kind of the thing is that by this three federal system, when it comes, now the government has made that all the local bodies should have their own master plan, and all of them are making their own master plans. And so those kind of conflict will be less, because some of the municipalities have already formed their own kind of what needed them. They go further ahead, and so but the conflict comes, then provincial government may comes, and sometimes maybe state government also has to. But there is a judiciary, all the three systems in all the level, local also, the provincial and the federal system also have their own administrative, judiciary, and also the other system there.
Mm-hmm. And is there a regional master plan for the metropolitan area, or is that something that's not been done yet, or there's no intention of doing it? So a land use master plan for the region of Kathmandu?
Yes, there are the, there are the land use master plan, but now it still need to be again revised and made. Before there was a master plan, but because of these new systems, now they have a new boundaries. So now again, it has to form a new, and almost management plans are there already, and it is in the final step. And once it will be final, then it will be go to the implementation stage, I think. Hopefully it will soon come in to the action.
And do you feel like the previous plan had an actual impact on the way the metropolitan area developed? It's a rapidly expanding metropolitan area. Did the plan actually manage to plan?
No at all. No at all. You cannot. It's kind of a haphazard if you see in the Kathmandu metropolitan city, because as I told you, it is mainly of the in migration for the one is the because of the transition, I will say political, because it is comfortable to live in a Kathmandu metropolitan city. So the people from the rural parts outside from the all over the Nepal come here because and the second is the opportunities. As I told you, this is the center from the very beginning, and so the GDP about 25% of the national GDP goes from this Kathmandu municipal city, excluding the agriculture and other productive sector. Only from the that means here is the opportunity for jobs and the other kind of work, and so the people come up here to live and they never go back, and that makes and that makes you will see in the center there is almost no free land. You will see only 0.48% new planning has told that only 0.48% of land is free in the core areas now, and now it is spreading to the periphery, and in the periphery is now the KMC is developing the plan how it should be. As I told you, the smart cities and the smart villages they have been developing, and also the road. That is how it is planning. In the core, it is almost you cannot do anything, and it doesn't work. Even if the previous plan, the people are living here and they don't go, and you cannot control them. And mostly, and political factors also playing a role, because political still unstable in our context, and and that's also making difficulties in implementation parts.
How are natural resources valued in this context? Is there any way that natural values might be preserved even without this strong planning strategy?
Yes. Yeah, that is a good question, because the peoples are, as I told you, most of the citizens here, they really wants their culture, and also we have the ethnic and cultural value also, and also we have a natural beauty in Nepal, Himalayas and mountains. You see the beautiful, and it is a tourist. Tourist is the one of the main tourism is the main source, and the hospitality business is the one of the main income of the nation also. And peoples are developing by their own, as you said. Yeah, they want to conserve these things, and they are doing this also with the with the kind of, they come more forward for these things.
Mhm.
These
Do
things.
you feel like people want to preserve this natural beauty and landscapes and also the resources because of tourism? So tourism might be a motivator for protection, or instead it is one of the causes of environmental impacts?
It can be the both, you can say. You can see, yeah, because of that the lots of people come also, and they have to stay, no, and some of the places it is, as you said, it is difficult to manage as well, but however, yeah, and at least the people knows we need to preserve something like that. But as a Kathmandu resident, as Suzanne said, but I was born here in Kathmandu. I grew up here, I study here and everything here. So working also here, I would say. That
Yeah.
makes me, sometimes, like Pedro says, this became so now different with this urban is so difficult actually to explain.
But Sydney is quite similar and yet very different. So pre-COVID,
Yes, I was going to ask you the same question, so go ahead.
yes. Pre-COVID, Sydney was very much like Kathmandu, where everyone want to move to city, and it just become more and more packed. And regional township is become, the population growth is it just plateaued. That's it. Where young people want to move to the city and the exciting time and all. And during COVID, people actually realized the natural beauty in the regional townships, and not only they want to preserve it, they want to live in it. So as a result of it, a lot of younger couples, they actually want to have the space and for the family to be able to venture out of an apartment, not from viewing from the window, instead they actually live in it. So they actually move to regional townships, and the property market within regional townships actually gone up.
Yeah.
And for some of the regional township in coastal area, the people live in apartments and all, they're actually being pushed out because of the demand, and they actually have to live away. So one of the quite famous area is Byron Bay, and all the people actually, the renters, they said, look, we actually can't even afford to live in Byron Bay because of the rent's gone up so much because of the demand from both tourists as well as people want to buy in the region. As a result, they have to, even though the children study in the area, they actually have to move to a different area and drive back to the same school or to the work area and things like that. So that's a bit of a change for the distribution of population. And also the master plan probably didn't predict this pre-COVID.
And is housing a widespread problem in Sydney? House prices and people being priced out of central locations, is that a major issue?
It's always been a problem. And moving to country towns, shifting to country towns is actually a good thing because it spread out the population a bit and also bring extra economy to the regional townships as well. And also jobs and capabilities. So I think thanks to all the Zoom meetings and all, it become more viable to live away from the major city and actually still carry out the same task with the job. And a separate phenomenon is that Sydney City had a lot of major plans pre-COVID. Is set out for a many years plan to modernize the city CBD area. So there's major upgrade of train stations, tunnels, and all sort of and major ring road freeways building. And during the past 12 months, some of the new roads happened quietly when there's no traffic. And we didn't even realize until we drove there and we thought, hang on, there's a new road there. So that was a
Great.
bit of surprise.
Great.
What
And
about psychopaths, like a bike network? Is there something that already existed? Some cities have been using COVID as a chance, as an opportunity, since the road congestion was for a short period as a little less heavy. A lot of municipalities took the chance to reserve lanes for bicycle paths and so on. How is the cycling situation in Sydney? Is that an expanding thing?
so at the beginning, pre-COVID, City of Sydney set up a lot of bike paths, specifically for bicycle all the way to the city CBD. And that's excellent idea to enable office worker to ride to work. However, the bikes do ride among traffic.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
there are some dedicated bike paths, but there are also some paths where they don't continue. So you have to go through traffic before the next bike path. So there's certain risk. However, since COVID, the CBD become a ghost town.
Oh, yeah.
Most of people working from home. And we see a lot of bicycles actually in the suburbs, but for a different reason. The people are not traveling to work. In fact, it's in the evening because these bicycles are delivering food.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
that's
And
actually very sustainable.
Yes.
sustainable for the businesses because
I mean,
there's a
just in
fair bit of
terms of the
demand.
mode of transport.
Yeah.
However, I don't think it's very good for the workers on
No.
delivering food because they certainly take a fair bit of risk in the dark roads in the suburbs as well to deliver food. And I don't think the profit margin for the food vendors will be okay, but for the food delivery people, it's not really good. And but while you're driving in the suburb in a darker neighborhood and not very well lit, and then there's bicycle with training wheels almost, and they will be zipping between paths. Yeah, it's a different setup altogether.
It's an interesting and weird new challenge. I was about to ask you exactly about that. So, has the current pandemic context brought any lessons of relevance to the metropolitan scale that might give us some clues of some spatial reorganization for the future?
I would say for internet connection, so pre-COVID in Sydney, it was still a lot of using modem and all, and they was in a transition to cable, optical fiber and cable network. And it was a slow transition and taken a few years. And pre-COVID, some of the people are still sort of, oh, is it up to our suburb to get changed now, this month or next month? It's a bit of uncertainty. But because of COVID, everyone working from home, and there's a demand there, everything's sped up. And there's no interruption with this session so far. That's because I do have the optical fiber network now. It's a luxury. But I think that's also a good thing for regional townships as well, where it's quite remote and the internet access is not always reliable. That's for the community as well as for children to access, I guess, online programs and all as well. So that's certainly with COVID, the technology have the demand and the push, and everything happened much more quicker and more advanced. You just bring everyone to the same page, I guess.
You mentioned people moving to the outer suburbs and the townships, and you also mentioned jobs. But do you feel like there's an actual reconfiguration in the job offer within the metropolitan area taking place, or is this a temporary phenomena associated with the COVID situation?
I would say that personally, I believe it's a temporary condition. However, it's give people a bit of uncertainty about the job security because of the changing status of the businesses during COVID. Some of the business can sustain throughout the COVID period and maybe go past that and come out the other end. But some of them actually, the business actually have to close. And so as a result, some of the workers just lose their jobs. Because of that, I think just give general public a bit of low self confidence about their job security, because you hear their friends losing jobs and so on and so forth. And the businesses, some of them are doing extremely well. The online businesses are going very well. But in terms of shopping in general, the retail business, they are not going as well. And so going forward, it'd be good if the workers still can have that opportunity to work from home, because I think many employers see the capability of people working from home is just as effective. And but on the other hand, if that's happened, what happened to the office space in the CBD? So that's both sides of a coin. So some people may win, some people may lose. It certainly impact everyone, for sure.
Worst, fortunately, Australia has been spared the worst impacts of COVID. Let's hope it stays that way. But was there a debate about public service provision associated with the health services, the transport services, in a context where you want to keep people apart with the 2-meter distance or whatever? Was there a debate about public service provision associated with COVID?
So the essential public services like water supply and sewage services are actually is continue. It doesn't stop, and it's not possible to stop. Same with power generation and all. It still need to be functional to serve the city, just because people are working from home. So I don't think there was any change in service provision, but you do, I would say customer services, a lot of people working from home, and it's probably actually more effective in some ways. In terms of sewage
systems.
In terms of sewage, I would just want to mention that usually it's quite negative media about sewage, because all you hear about is sewage spill towards the beaches and polluting areas and all. During COVID, because sewage system, they have managed to work out ways to test COVID in the sewage from individual suburbs, and on the basis of a treatment plant treating sewage from a different suburbs. So they were able to pick up which area is still have COVID issues, and that's a spectacular new technology, and certainly give sewage a really positive outlook to support the system going well.
It's amazing. A few years ago, I heard of a study that's amazing that was tracing the use of illegal drugs in European cities by analyzing exactly the sewage, because there are trace amounts of cocaine and whatever in the water, and they were able to tell which cities had the worst drug issues just by analyzing the sewage. Fortunately, it's being used to trace COVID and, well, more or less effectively in Australia. So let's hope it stays that way. Now, how was Kathmandu, Rejina? How was Kathmandu affected by the COVID? You've already mentioned that you're no longer on lockdown, but was the country severely affected, and how did that affect the working of the city?
Yeah, it was affected, of course, but especially, as I told you, the country itself, tourism is one of the main business for the country, not only for the Kathmandu, whole country. For the whole, it became the crash. Almost 4 million people were not in the job. But the things happen is that the positive aspect is that the people, now that they don't have a job, the hospitality business especially, they started to go back to some of them go back to their village from here. Lots of them go back to their countryside, and they started agriculture and the cultivation as a business. And that is a good point here. They learn that these are the beneficiaries, and has to be, because in the past, as I told you, because of the political also, you will see if you go to the outside of the Kathmandu and the city centers, the lots of barren land. Before, they are all been cultivated, because the peoples migrate to the urban areas, and most of other labor person go to the outside the country also. That is the main problems there. Most of them goes to this Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and for the working now. And also come to Portugal. I think lots of Nepalese are there also. Almost 500 something shops I could find there by the Nepalese also, and go outside. But because of this COVID case, when they lost their job, some of them, they started those business very good, and it is revived. And that is a good learning for the lots of Nepalese as well, who have come to stay here. And they are earning quite a lot by cultivating and also raising the animals, domesticating the animals as well. And that is a good point that, and government also brings about the plan for that. If the people want to do those kind of business, they support, government support them. They bring the plan of this kind of thing also. That is the positive aspect. The another positive is that during the COVID, the air pollution is very clean in here. We got a very clean, but once it is gone, now it's again resume. So I don't know how long it will be, but it's a good learning. And also the other is the health system, because it is most of the, as I told you, for the health and the education, that is why the people come to the Kathmandu city. Most of the hospitals and the good health system is here, center, and because of this COVID system, now the government, also the people also realize that it has to be for the other regions also has to be developed, and that is what it is going on, and that is learning also. It has to be moved to the further ahead also, and that is also a good learning. And I think, yeah, but once that is what we are speculating, and of course the distance learning became the quite immersed, and everybody accepted, and everybody enjoyed. And it's the same in our country. Not all the schools have those kind of facilities, especially in the government school. They don't have, in the rural parts actually don't have, but the ministry has provided, and they started to build this kind of learning also, and that will be the good point for the things also. That is quite good to learn also. The IT business is quite up, and that is go. And by IT, before the e-banking, e-paying is not so much common here, but during this year, now everybody is using the same thing. Yeah, for the paying bills and everything, they're commonly using. The before, not like that. You have to go by yourself, and you stay queue for your electricity bill and everything. You stay in queue and you pay like that. But by the COVID, now it is for the most of the offices, and the most that you don't need to go there. You just can
Yeah,
pay
you
by
raised
home and live
an interesting
positive.
question. Were local businesses able to adapt to this online shopping trend, or basically they had to shut down during the COVID pandemic because they weren't able to migrate to online shopping?
Uh, in the Kathmandu,
Yeah.
there is a very limited online shopping in Kathmandu during the COVID. They almost shut down, and even in the shutdown, the borders, they never shut down because as you, in Australia, you have all the seas, but we are landlocked, and the access is from the Indian South borders. For the goods that never shut for the whole, I would say, never shut down. And even in the lockdowns, we have not like a for the 1 hour in the morning and the 1 hour in the evening all the localities have the opening time for the
Okay.
shops. Yeah, so that's good. But for the smaller shopkeepers, as I said, they all have to shut down and they have to go back. As I told you, they have to because it's so difficult to stay in the Kathmandu without earning. It's so expensive here, and
Okay.
so all of them go back actually, and it's like a ghost city at the time.
Do you
The-
feel it will be a lasting trend that people will go back to rural areas, or as soon as COVID stops being an issue, they'll come back to Kathmandu?
uh, yes, that is it. It has to be actually. That is what I would say. Our government or our planners or all of us has failed. That's that should be gaps, or we should have make them stay over there, giving them opportunity, showing there. But that could not have happened. Once open, now it is already crowded in Kathmandu.
Yes.
Kathmandu. It's all open. Everybody is here now, and you can see the street shops everywhere. As nothing happened. Um, uh, they have some of them uses masks, some of them do not uses masks. You have to take care of yourself. It's something like that. Yeah, I think do we get immune now by COVID? We would say.
We're
Virus.
we're approaching the end of our very interesting session. I would like to ask you to make a final comment or to pose a question. So Regina, do you have a question you want to ask Suzanne about the way Sydney works, or was there some aspect you wanted to hear about in the other city?
Yes, I want to learn a lot from the Suzanne they don't have a water problem. We have a water problem, even though we have a very fresh water, rich in fresh water. But in Kathmandu, you will be surprised to hear we have a once a week water supply system.
Mm.
Only 1 week we have a 2 hour water, and you have to
Oh.
collect that system, and not enough. And I think how did you plan? Because I don't know the what is the sources of water in the Australia, especially the drinking water source.
Oh, that's a very complex question, and I don't think can be answered within a minute. But I certainly think, equally, I would like to learn from Kathmandu about the use of groundwater. That's definitely a resource that will probably eliminate a lot of evaporation issues. And actually, evaporation is a big issue in a running river, and also with the hot sun going on, as well as climate change impact. So yeah, I look forward to more discussions. For
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, love to have a long learning. Yeah.
And and I would like to ask about through the COVID period, Rejina, tell me any lessons learned from the COVID period of what do you appreciate the most of Kathmandu over the COVID period when you can working from home, missing the families, the environment, the people, or just general good health and meeting up with community, anything.
Yeah, okay, I can share that during the COVID. As I told you, Kathmandu metropolitan cities, you said the noise pollution and all the congestion. One thing I will say the positive aspect is that it is silent. At the time, you can stay at home silently, I would say. And that is a positive. And as I told you, your pollution is improved. That is also quite good. And the another thing is that this online things brings about because in the metropolitan city, even if everything open, you cannot meet your you cannot have a time to go to the peoples, no? You meet the friends, you meet the relatives and all the times together. But by this, yeah, like you and I can talk, Suzanne, and also the Pedro is here. In the same way, we have a chance to meet my uh, uh, friends, groups. That is a positive aspect. But on the contrary, lot of negative aspect, I would say, like that. It should not have happened, I would say, because there are lots of things happen, like for the elderly people, and that you cannot go outside and you stay for a whole year and you cannot go out. That makes psychological problems, you see. And for us, we do work in online, but the elderly people who already not working also, no, and for them it's really a kind of a very difficult parts, and that is really very bad. They became older, 10 years older than if they in a normal life, I would say. They add the 10 more years to their age. That is seen. And also there was an increase in suicidal cases in Kathmandu during the COVID. That is very bad. Yeah, because of that is suicidal cases is from the young. That is because of this work gun, no, their work gun, the security work, and they cannot access, and that's make very bad, and that's the thing we should think about. That is it.
Regina, of course, this is all very depressing, but I think you've made an incredible synthesis of exactly what the real impacts of the COVID pandemic are, because we're always focused about the lack of economic income and the problems with transportation and public provision and so on. But I think you hit the nail. Those are the issues that really matter and that we fail to address, like mental health issues, and supporting the elderly and so on. Unfortunately, we'll have to kind of end on that sad note, but let's hope in the future we'll meet in happier circumstances. I would like to thank you so much to the both of you. This was an extremely interesting conversation into I would say some of the most different cities you could come up with. One located at sea level with water everywhere. The other is one of the highest cities in the world in a valley. But obviously we can learn from each other even across such different environments. Again, thank you very much. This was extremely interesting. And I hope we can meet again in happier circumstances.
Thank you, Pedro, and also Suzanne. It's really a very amazing discussion, and I didn't realize we have already come to the end. That is it. Thank you, and hope sometimes you come to the Kathmandu as well, because we open now. You are not open. We are open already. So you are welcome here.
It's a pleasure meeting you, Rejina, and
Yeah.
thank you, Pedro, for bringing the world closer.
Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful. Okay, thank you very much.